Hi, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. So a while back, I did a video recommending 5 audiobooks where I thought that the audiobook narrator really helped bring the story to life and made my experience reading those books more enjoyable. And today I have 4 more audiobook recommendations for you. The first audiobook I want to talk about is When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. I had initially started this one physically, but I was so enamored by it that I immediately started to listen to the audio and do a immersion read. And I think that was absolutely the right move for this story. If you don't know anything about this book, the synopsis says, one night, Jess, a struggling actress, finds a 5-year-old runaway hiding in the bushes outside of her apartment. After a violent and bloody encounter with the boy's father, she and the boy find themselves running for their lives. As they attempt to evade the boy's increasingly desperate father, horrifying incidents of butchery follow them. At first, Jess thinks she understands what they're up against, but she's about to learn that there's more to these surreal and grisly events than she could ever imagine, and that when the wolf finally comes home, no one will be spared. I don't want to tell you too much more about the plot of this book, but I do want to talk about the narrator. The audiobook narrator for this did such a good job. The emotions that the character portrays on the page are very nuanced. She is dealing with grief because in the very first chapter, we learned that she has just found out her father has died, and her father had apparently left her and her mother when she was 3 or 4. He left and never came back, right? So even though she's experiencing grief, this grief is entangled in all these other emotions, and there's a lot to unravel there. And throughout the course of the actual plot, you do get kind of these internal thought moments where Jess is kind of thinking about her past and what if this had been different, and what if this had been different, would she be better prepared for the situation that she's dealing with now? And there is so much subtlety and nuance in that grief that's wrapped up in all of these other emotions, where there's regret and grief and loss and the big what if of, what if her dad never left, and would her grief be different if he had been in her life, or would he have been disappointed her so much that she would still not feel grief the way she thinks you're supposed to feel it, etc., etc. So there is all this nuance there, and I just want to say the narrator did such a phenomenal job. There were some points in this story where you could really feel the pain in her voice. The narrator did such a great job intoning those emotions vocally, especially if you're not reading along with the book, obviously, because I think when you're just listening and kind of doing chores or something and going about your day, you may miss some of the subtleties that are laid out for you in the text. But I think that the narrator was amazing in that aspect. It'll say something happened, or she says something and it's she gasped or she exhaled or whatever. But the narrator said that line in the way that it was also described. So if she's saying something with a shaky voice, the line literally sounded shaky and uncertain, or you could almost feel the fear sometimes in some of these scenes. And I just thought it really brought it to life. I could not put it down. I read the first, I want to say I read the first 25 pages in a day, and then the next day I read the whole book. I finished the whole book the next day. I just didn't want to put it down. I think at the time I was sick as well, so I was really just in bed reading, didn't want to put it down. It was amazing, and I had a great time with it. There is also this really fun dual narration aspect in here. It is just narrated by this one main character, but every now and then she would remember one sentence that her dad had said, or she would see a note her dad had left, or she'd imagine something oh, maybe my dad would say something like this. And in those moments and instances, Nat Cassidy actually narrated those lines. And I remember the first time it happened, the text shows up in the story in red, but then in the audiobook, those red text moments are his voice. And I thought that was so interesting. And at first I didn't know that it was him doing the narration. So I was oh, okay, cool. There's this second narrator for some of these kind of flashback dialogue moments. But then at the end, there's an author's note, and that's like narrated by him as well. And I was like, oh my God, it's him. And I think because that he is like a theater kid, that he is really able to help bring a lot of nuance to those. He only got one or two, maybe three sentences in the audiobook, like 3 lines in the audiobook. But even then, like, I think he really did a good job. Like you can see here, there's some red text on the page for you. It's very early in the book, so not too much of a spoiler there. But yeah, it was just another layer to the immersion that this audiobook offered. But it just added like another layer of immersion because we're getting to hear what she is hearing. I mean, she's a fictional character in a book, so she's not hearing anything. But you know what I mean? Like in the story, this is something that she's remembering in her mind, or that she's hearing, or she's having a flashback of this like thing or whatever. She's hearing something in a certain way. She's imagining her father's voice saying some of these lines. And so we also get to hear what she would be hearing. And I just thought it was such a nice added touch. I gave this book a 5 overall, and I do think that I would have given it a 5 without the audiobook, but I honestly don't think I could have gone through it in a single day without the audiobook because I'm just kind of a slow reader, and that's just that's not the book's fault. It is how I've always been. I've been a little bit of a slower reader. But the audiobook for this one was like unputdownable. I was like listening to it nonstop, listening to it while I had lunch, doing chores that day. I was like following along with the book, trying to like walk around with the book, like keeping pace and stuff. And I just had a great time. So highly recommend this one. I would check the trigger warnings though. Nat Cassidy is really great about having a page at the beginning of his books with content warnings on them. I have read 3 books by him so far, and so far all 3 of those books have had a content warning page, which is fantastic. But I will just remind you to check them out before you read it. I probably shouldn't have read this in the moment that I read it because of some of the content warnings. Like I definitely was towing the line of like what I was comfortable with in that moment. But honestly, I think it kind of helped me in a way because the main character is experiencing a type of grief that isn't like a standard grief. And I think that I really related to her on that. So I think that even though the content warnings probably should have warned me off of this for a couple of months, I do think that this was actually something that really hit home for me. And the narrator really brought it to life and really made me like visualize myself in these shoes of this character and like what I would do in her situation. And yeah, highly recommend. There is going to be a theme in this video of these audiobooks being horror. I want to say 3 out of 4 of them are horror books. I've been very into horror on audio within the last year or so. So if you're not a horror person, I'm sorry, but most of these are horror books. That being said, the next book I want to talk about is Jackal by I believe it's Aaron E. Adams. And if you're not familiar with this book, I'm just going to read the synopsis for all of them. So this one says, Liz Rochester is coming home reluctantly. As a Black woman, Liz doesn't exactly have fond memories of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, a predominantly white town. But her best friend is getting married, so she braces herself for a weekend of awkward, passive-aggressive reunions. Liz has grown, though. She can handle whatever awaits her. But on the day of the wedding, somewhere between dancing and dessert, the couple's daughter, Caroline, disappears, and the only thing left behind is a piece of white fabric covered in blood. As a frantic search begins with the police combing the streets for Caroline, Liz is the only one who notices a pattern. A summer night, a missing girl, a party in the woods. She's seen this before. Keisha Woodson, the only other Black girl in Liz's high school, walked into the woods with a mysterious man and was later found with her chest cavity ripped open and her heart removed. Liz shudders at the thought that it could have been her, and now with Caroline missing, it can't be a coincidence. As Liz starts to dig through the town's history, she uncovers a horrifying secret about the place she once called home. Children have been going missing in these woods for years, all of them Black and all of them girls. So I ended up giving this book a 4.25 overall. I thought the majority of it, I want to say like the first 90% was so mysterious and like suspenseful and had a very nagging like terrifying almost atmosphere to it, because we're in the shoes of this main character, right? So she's coming in from out of town, kind of against her will, because her old friend is getting married and she wants to be there for this wedding. But this is a town that she very much doesn't feel like she has any roots in. She's kind of done with it. She grew up there. She was one of like 2 Black girls growing up, and she just was so sick of the like racism and microaggressions that once she was able to, she moved away and started a life and a job elsewhere, right? And so she's coming back to this town, and she's obviously apprehensive about that, and she goes to this wedding. And very early on in the book, and it's also in the synopsis, she goes to the wedding and this little girl goes missing. And she is the one that brings attention to it, because I think she's the one who sees this like bloodied piece of clothing or whatever in the ground. And the wedding was kind of at like a barn, so they're like kind of in the woods, and she sees the blood, brings the attention, like, hey, where's Caroline? And then the whole thing, like, screeches to a halt, and the plot takes off from there. And there is such a interesting dynamic in this story, especially with the way that the audiobook narrator gives the narration of it, because I do think that the main character is someone that you want to root for, of course, because why wouldn't we be rooting for her in a town full of racist pricks, And I feel like it's so easy to empathize with her and put yourself in her shoes, that the way that these other people are treating her after this like inciting incident of Caroline going missing, like it's so easy to be like, these people are fucking assholes. What's their problem? Like, why are they like acting as if she's the one who did it just because she saw the bloody piece of clothing? Like, people are very much racist towards her because she's the one who found out this girl is missing, and it makes no sense. And so the whole book is kind of this like, it's just kind of like culminating, right, in your mistrust of the town that we know of, because we know from the very first chapter that she's really not wanting to come back here. So like the town is already untrustworthy. And then this girl goes missing, and then our main character is slowly piecing together this mystery alongside a cop. I don't think they're really like working together, but she is trying to give him information because she obviously wants her friend's daughter to be found alive and safe and healthy and like, alive. She wants to find her alive. But essentially, the way that this narrator lets that mistrust seep into her voice. Whenever there's character between multiple dialogues, you can really feel the main character's apprehension. I think that her voice overall too was just really like beautiful and rich and smooth. And when you narrate an audiobook, there is a level to it where you need to be acting out some of these feelings and emotions when there's dialogue present, because I can just read a text and read it flat and call it a day, but that's not going to be engaging for the listener. And I just think that this is another case of the narrator really embodying the tone and emotion of the story. And I think it was just phenomenal. Now, I didn't love the ending. Like, I loved the whole book overall. The ending was just like a little confusing to me. And maybe I just missed something. It's very possible that I could have missed something since I was not following along with my eyes. But the ending just got a little bit confusing. I still enjoyed it. Like I said, I give it a 4.25 stars. I just think I was confused by the ending a smidge. But it wasn't enough to like really hinder my overall enjoyment. And I think that because the narrator did such an amazing job, it kind of like helped carry me through that moment of confusion, basically. Because by the end, I was like, oh, okay, like once we got that last sentence and I looked back at the plot in hindsight, I was like, okay, I think I get it. But the narrator, even though I felt like I was confused a little bit, the performance was just so enrapturing that it really helped me like carry through that confusion. Whereas like if I was reading it physically, I probably would have had to reread things a few times and been a little bit more confused, and maybe even given it a slightly lower rating, like a 4-star instead of a 4.25. But this narrator did a phenomenal job of bringing those emotions to life. And I just think that, again, her voice overall was really like so nice to listen to. Some people just have a great voice, okay? And I think that this is a really good book to listen to, especially because it is supposed to be tense and a little unnerving and a little scary. And also, it's like, you're rooting for the main character. And so you're hearing everything from her point of view. And you're just kind of like, waiting for people to disappoint you because she's waiting for people to disappoint her. And it's just easy to go along for the ride. The narrator does an amazing job of getting you from start to finish, and highly recommend this one as well. Again, like I said, we're reading some horror this year. Okay, the next book I'm going to talk about is not a horror. I'll take a break from the horror and save the final one for last. But the next book that I listened to on audio and thought the narrator did such a good job is The Sirens by Amelia Hart. This book I loved. I did give it a 4 stars. I did not love it as much as Wayward by Amelia Hart. But that being said, this had her signature storytelling device of a timeline in the present and a timeline in the past. This follows a girl named Lucy, and she has something horrific happen to her where her privacy is violated. A boy that she has a crush on shares a naked picture of her on the internet, and it goes kind of viral within her school. And so a lot of people have seen her naked body against her will. And she has this incident where she wakes up with her hands around his throat, doesn't know how she got into his room, doesn't know why she's trying to choke him, but she runs away from school and takes a quick road trip to her sister's house. Her sister's name is Jess. And when she gets there, she can't find her sister. So we kind of bounce back and forth between this plot of Lucy in the present, not being able to find her sister, and then kind of trying to avoid the repercussions of her actions. And we also have this other timeline taking place of these 2 twin sisters who are called Mary and Eliza, who are torn from their home in Ireland, and they end up in a cell on this convict ship, and they are transported to Australia. And we kind of get the timeline of them being on this ship and kind of how they got into their circumstances. And then we also have the timeline of Lucy searching for Jess, but Lucy keeps having dreams about Mary and Eliza, and she doesn't know why. And then she finds a painting in Jess's house that is literally what she is seeing in her dreams. So she knows that her sister has been having the same dreams as her. And that's really all I can tell you without spoiling too much. But I want to say, the narrator for this book did such an incredible job. Lucy is Australian and Mary and Eliza are Irish. And the Irish accent in the Mary and Eliza chapters is so good that I thought there were 2 narrators. It's not. It's one narrator. I was so impressed with how she changed her voice. Not just the accent, but the tone of it as well was so different between Lucy's chapter and the Mary and Eliza's chapters that I literally, for the first 60% of this book, thought it was 2 narrators until I looked on the information for the audiobook and saw that it was just one woman. She crushed it. She did so good. And there's also a part in here where in the Mary and Eliza chapter where one of them starts singing. I won't say why or when, because that will spoil the tone of those chapters for you. So I don't really want to give too much away, but one of them starts singing, and I normally don't, as a music lover, I find it most of the time unbearable when there is music written into a book. I love Lord of the Rings and I love The Hobbit, but I fast forward through the singing parts because, to be honest with you, they're just a little too long, and honestly, I just don't care. And I hate reading a song on paper because most of the time it's just words in italic and you can't tell what the beat is supposed to be. You can't tell literally anything about the music except the words. But this singing was a cappella in this scene, and she had an amazing singing voice. She literally was and I listened to my audiobooks on 1.8 to 2.1 times speed. Like that's kind of the threshold I stay within. I literally rewound it and put it on 1 time speed just to hear her sing at the like regular like timbre that she was singing at and stuff. That's how good her voice was. It was so beautiful. I was literally in tears, like listening to this. My eyes started tearing up. I'm listening and I'm like, this is the most beautiful singing I've ever heard in a book before. And it's not, not saying every narrator who sings is bad, but there was so much emotion in that a cappella singing moment that I genuinely was taken aback. I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. This is haunting. It's so sad. It's so melancholy, but like also so beautiful. And the book is called The Sirens, and it genuinely felt like a siren was singing. If I heard that singing while I was on a boat, I would jump in the waves. I would jump 1,000%. Like, Mary, Eliza, hold my hands. I'm coming, darling. You know what I'm saying? I did really love this story for what it was, but I think that Wayward just had a little bit more nuance to me. I do think this one was kind of a little bit more in your face with like what the plot is supposed to be. Whereas in Wayward, some of those threads between the past and the present are very fragile and you don't really know where they're coming into play or how they connect. But I think in this one, you absolutely, as the reader, will know. Honestly, I kind of knew what the thread connection was just by reading the synopsis. Like I already knew before I went into the book. So I think because I could see that and knew where it was going, that I was just kind of like, okay, I'm along for the ride. But I think if you go into this without reading the synopsis and you're expecting like a really big plot twist, I think it might be obvious to you. But I don't really know if the plot twist is like the point of the story. To me, it feels like the point of the story is more just enjoying the haunting nature of what's happening. And I think that because that's kind of the like approach I took to it, was that I kind of already know where this is going. I'm just going to enjoy the haunting nature of this plot, that I'll just go along for the ride. And I enjoyed it. And I am really excited to see whatever Amelia Hart has coming next. And I would absolutely 1,000,000 times over listen to another audiobook by this narrator. I should look up her name. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'm so sorry. But I would love to see what else she's narrated, because wow, what a performance. I literally could not believe that it was one person. I thought it was two people. The way that her voice and accent changed for the Irish chapters was astounding. Literally mind-boggling. I was so flabbergasted when I found out it was only one lady. So, do they give like Oscars for audiobooks? Is that a thing? It should be. Anyways, if it was a thing, I would give her an Oscar for this performance, because the performance itself, 5 out of 5 stars. The book itself, I gave it a 4, but that's still solid. I really enjoyed it, and I do have faith in Amelia Hart, so whatever she writes next, I will absolutely be reading. I did not listen to Wayward on audio. I wonder who narrated that book. If it was the same person, maybe I'll reread it on audio, because again, I loved it. Her voice, incredible. Her performance, incredible. Very nuanced, lots of emotion. The singing, stunning, beautiful, gorgeous, perfect. So no complaints from me here on the audiobook. A absolute feast for my ears. And the final book I have to talk about today is You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drews. This is their first foray into adult horror. Is it horror or is it suspense? I would say that this is like a psychological suspense with horror elements. The synopsis says, single mother Elodie's life has become a fairy tale. She's met Bren, equal parts golden retriever, devoted and sinfully handsome. He's whisked her and her autistic son Jude away to the crumbling family house he's renovating. She has a new husband, a new home, and a new baby on the way. Everything is perfect until Jude claims he can hear voices in the walls. He says their renovations are hurting the house. Even Elodie can't ignore it. Something strange is going on. The question is it with the house or with her son? And what is Elodie hiding? So this is kind of haunted house-esque, and I just recently finished it. I'm actually doing a vlog right now for reading 3 haunted house stories, where I did try a chapter tag, which I'll link the first part of that up above, but I'm currently filming the second part, and I have already finished this one. And I want to say the audiobook for this book was fantastic. fantastic. It's just another case of this woman being so good at the delivery of some of these emotional lines, especially because it is suspenseful. It is creepy. There are things that are happening in this book that had me so unnerved. I could not go to sleep at night. I think I started this when my husband was away on a work trip. And so that night I had to go to sleep alone. And I'm laying in my bed and my house is making noises. And all I can hear is this narrator in my ear saying all these creepy things that have been happening in this house. And I'm like, I can't sleep now. But this, not only is C.G. Drews just fast becoming one of my favorite horror authors alongside Nat Cassidy, I also think that they just really have a lot of skill in their like chosen writing style. This one is so different from the other two books that I've read, and I gave this a 5 stars. A quick honorable mention to Don't Let the Forest In, which is a YA botanical horror, and Hazelthorn, which is a YA gothic botanical horror. This one is more gothic. This one is a little bit more contemporary, but both of these books are extremely beautifully haunting. They are written in a way that is very whimsical and poetic, but haunting and just so like melancholy and very poetic in nature. And this one is so different to that. There are definitely a couple of poetic moments throughout this like horror psychological suspense situation. However, that's not the like overall writing style. It is more aligned with what you would typically expect, I think, from like a psychological horror. And I think that they knocked it out of the park. The other two books I've given like 4.2 and 4.5 stars. This is the first book I've given of theirs that is a 5 star. And I don't know if that's because I audio, because I did start it with my eyes, and then I switched to the audio about 40% of the way in because I found the audiobook on Spotify. Now, the narrator does such an amazing job. There is a lot of dialogue from her husband, so she's having to do like a man voice, and a lot of the times when a woman narrator does a man voice, it can be annoying, and vice versa. When a man narrator does a woman's voice, it is almost always annoying and mildly insulting the way that men think women sound. Hers was really good. And I think that she just really brought all of these characters to life because she had to do the main character who is kind of the narrator and we get the main perspective from, but we do also get some moments of her husband, and we also are getting the child as well. So she's having to do a boy child's voice, a grown woman's voice, and a grown man's voice. And honestly, all 3 voices were very distinct, and it didn't feel mocking because, like I said, sometimes I feel like when a man narrator does a woman's voice, it does feel mildly mocking, but this one did not sound like that at all. It was not annoying in any way, shape, or form for any of these 3 perspectives that we got the most of. And of course, there's side characters and stuff, but this narrator did such a good job of making the main character seem genuinely scared of what was happening around her that, like I said before, I literally couldn't sleep that first night where I was sleeping alone. I was like, I'm a little scared. I don't want to go to bed right now. This also takes place in Virginia, and I just moved away from Virginia last June. So I've only lived here for a year, but I lived in Virginia for like 8 years. So like the atmosphere, like, I was like, oh, it was so creepy. Like, oh. And it was like, just, yeah, it was a lot. And I literally don't want to say a single thing more about this than what it tells you in the synopsis. But I will say, just in case anyone is worried about the autistic young boy being represented poorly, C.G. Drews is autistic. They have talked about it multiple times on their Instagram. So this is an own voices representation for that. But I will say there is mistreatment of the autistic child in this book. So if that will be triggering to you, just make sure you go into it in the correct headspace, or just be aware of it before you go in, so it's not like a surprise and takes you off guard. but it is addressed, I will say, if that makes sense. But that being said, this narrator did such a good job, and I gave this book a 5 stars. And I still think about it. I've only just finished it within the last 2 weeks, but like I do think about it every couple of days. I'm like, oh my god, that thing that happened, that was crazy. Oh my god, that house is, or like my house. My house is very creaky, especially when it's windy. The upstairs will creak, and it does sound like footsteps. And I'll be like, oh my god, something, you did nothing wrong. Something's coming to my house. All I'm gonna say is I'm really glad I don't have wallpaper. Do with that what you will. So there you have it. These are 4 audiobooks that I highly recommend because these narrators narrated their asses off and just did an amazing job overall, bringing the characters to life, really giving a lot of emotion and making the stories feel alive and immersive through the sheer power of their voice. If you've made it this far in the video, leave a headphone emoji down in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!